Check Podcasts. Hi, I'm Bruce Williams. I am the CEO of the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce. This is Chamber Chats. We are broadcasting, as always, from the podcasting studios at Check Television. I would like to begin, as always, by acknowledging that I live and work in the ancestral territory of the Lekwungen-speaking Coast Salish nations, in particular the Songhees and the Esquimalt. We are proud and privileged to be living and working alongside them every single day. Chamber Chats is made possible through the support of Island Savings, a division of First West Credit Union. Throughout the pandemic, we have seen perspectives from all over the world as to how people are managing what's going on. And sometimes the entire experience was based on how urban or how rural you are. Big city experiences different from small city experiences. A couple of my colleagues on the island are here to talk about that right now. They are both the CEOs and executive directors of chambers of commerce located way at the end of a long road, one on the north tip of the island, the other on the west coast. Jen Dart is the executive director of the Tofino-Long Beach Chamber of Commerce. Hi, Jen. How are you?
Hi, Bruce. Thanks for having me.
And Elizabeth Aman-Hume is the executive director of the Chamber of Commerce in Port Hardy. Elizabeth, hi.
Hi, Bruce. Thank you for having us.
So I just want to do a bit of an overall. We're 2.5, almost 3 years into all of this stuff now. So Elizabeth, where is Port Hardy now compared to the very beginning of the outbreak?
Well, I would like to say that I'm speaking today from the traditional territory of the Kwayouth people, where we are grateful to live and work. Gila Kesla. Where we are today as opposed to 2 years ago, well, a lot happier, that's for sure, because 2 years ago, I think we were all feeling, I think a lot of us were scared. We weren't sure what was going on or what the future would hold. And I think that, the early days of the pandemic, it was quite gloomy for everyone. We missed seeing people and we missed our community getting together. And I feel like now, because, we've gone through this 2 years and we're just really feeling positive and hopeful and feeling like we've come through it. And it's not ongoing. It's not dark and depressing. It's like, yay, we did it. Now let's get on with things.
Yeah, exactly. Jen, how about in Tofino and Ucluelet and Long Beach area? What's going on there? How's everybody feeling? What's the mojo these days?
Yeah, coming to you from Tloquit traditional territory here in Clayoquot Sound. Good mojo, I would say. I would echo what Elizabeth was saying about, just looking forward to getting on. The beginning of the pandemic, where things were so uncertain and confusing and everyone was not knowing what to expect. And now we know what to expect. We know that people are going to come back and they're going to come in droves. So that's super, it's just very encouraging, and we're all looking forward to another busy season.
Yeah, for sure. You both are in areas that are very busy as far as tourism goes. We'll touch on that in just a couple of minutes. But Jen, I'm going to stick with you for a second about this. Tofino is a very rural place, right? You are at the end of a long drive by the time people get there. How do you feel the experience in your region was different from people in larger centers like Victoria?
Yeah, well, we were I think personally at quite a big advantage, lots of outdoor space to explore and hang out in. And we kind of saw that desire to escape those urban areas. So we did see quite an influx of people when it was possible to do some staycation traveling. But otherwise, like you said, our economy is completely reliant on tourism. So we were absolutely shut down. So it was a difficult time, for sure. And I'm sure Elizabeth had a similar experience. It's nice to have the areas to ourselves, but it was such a tough time all around.
Yeah, Elizabeth, same thing. How do you think that the rural nature, the physical location of where Port Hardy has made the experience different from those of us who live in cities?
Well, I used to watch the news and feel so grateful to live on the North Island and to live where I live. When you think about people who are having to stay at home and quarantine in a high-rise building, as opposed to here in Port Hardy, where you can step outside your front door and you're in nature. And I think that was a huge advantage for us. And I'll be forever grateful for that, because I don't know how people around the world that were stuck in apartment blocks and some of the crowded conditions that they were in, how you even manage. And I think that was what made a big difference for us.
Jen mentioned that people did go to Tofino when they could to sort of get away, get out of the city, get to somewhere more natural. Did you see much of that in Port Hardy?
We did when once travel was allowed again, because we also operate the visitor center here, so we have a pretty good eye on what's going on, and we saw people that wouldn't normally have traveled to Port Hardy because normally they might take their vacation elsewhere, and they couldn't do that for the last couple of years. So we met a lot of people from other parts of the island and other parts of BC. So that was kind of nice because now they're saying, well, they didn't know we had all this and they want to come back. So we certainly had a huge, like our parks were full, our campgrounds were full. And I think people were looking for those, what we call fewer faces and wide open spaces that make you feel safe and still enjoy yourself.
I have to think there's a lot of people that are probably watching this right now who haven't been to Port Hardy. I've been to Port Hardy a number of times. Spectacular trip, beautiful place to be. But as it's the place you live now, I want to bring this back home again with both of you. One of the biggest impacts we've seen, certainly in the last year to year and a half, is the increase in the cost of living and in particular housing. We could talk all day about that, but Jen, let's talk about it in Tofino, which even before the pandemic was a relatively unaffordable place. But how has that changed over the course of the pandemic?
Well, Bruce, I would say it's gotten worse. During the pandemic itself, it wasn't so much an issue, but now that things are up and running, and last year, again, we saw this as tourism ramped up. Like you said, we've had a severe housing shortage in Tofino for a number of years, and it's continuing to be a crisis situation. And I mean, it affects the whole community, it affects businesses. There is some relief coming through some affordable housing projects, but those are going to take some time. So obviously the high season is a real crunch time for us. And much of our staff is seasonal here. So a lot of businesses have had to purchase housing, lease housing to accommodate their staff. But then, of course, there's many businesses who can't afford to do that, or the stock just doesn't exist. So yeah, I would say it continues to be a huge problem.
Yeah, and Elizabeth, you on the other hand, in Port Hardy, were one of the more affordable places to live before the pandemic. How has that evolved?
I wouldn't say that's true anymore. I think the rents for when you can find a place to rent, because we have similar issues here. For example, if you were to be renting a house for around $1,500 5 years ago, just using my own experience, that same house is closer to $3,000. And the kind of house we could afford to rent 5 years ago is what you could probably get an apartment for now, if you're lucky. It is a huge issue. There's a whole a swath of people that are choosing to live in their fifth wheels and recreational vehicles and campgrounds on sort of the year-round basis. And I feel like they're almost the forgotten precariously I don't call them homeless because they have a place to live, but it's not sustainable and it's very precarious. And I think the way it impacts business, of course, is in staffing. Our businesses will tell you, we just polled them over the last 3 months. That's their number one problem. 95% of them can't find staff. And it loops back to, well, there's not places for people to live. So it makes it very, very challenging. And like Jen said, we have, challenging, people thinking outside of the box in terms of buying properties or leasing properties. Some accommodation providers might use some of their own stock, using their own rooms and campsites, but that, of course, cuts into their profit because then they can't sell those rooms to visitors. It's a big problem, and I think it's definitely gotten worse since COVID, I would say.
Yeah. I want to keep talking about workforce next. On Chamber Chats today, we're chatting about what's going on the northern tip of Vancouver Island and the west coast of Vancouver Island. Jen Dart is with us. She's the executive director of the Tofino-Long Beach Chamber of Commerce. And Elizabeth Aman-Hume is the executive director of the Port Hardy Chamber of Commerce. So, Jen, you'd mentioned about some employers in a position of having to buy accommodations to house their workers. That was just almost unheard of a few years ago. That was like a Whistler thing or New York City thing. But it's happening now, right? Isn't it?
Yeah, and talking to our local realtors who are members of our chamber, they they know which properties the employers are going to be interested in, and they know that those are more competitive for that reason. If there's a lot of bedrooms, for example, or a good setup for staff. It's really interesting because you're right. A few years ago, that wasn't in the realm of possibility for a small business owner, and a lot of them don't want to be landlords either. So we don't have in Tofino, and certainly not in Port Hardy, we don't have that one large employer. Like at a ski hill, there might be the mountain is the biggest employer, so they might undertake to build staff housing. We don't have that here. We have individual businesses trying to find their own solutions, and they've been quite varied, and some of them very have good models. When you were talking about fifth wheels, we actually have a couple of places in town where workers can park a fifth wheel and live in it. And those are under temporary use permits right now, but that's certainly part of the solution here. And it's actually quite for that segment, for a certain segment, they actually do want to do that on at least seasonal, sometimes year-round basis, which seems a bit tough out here on the West Coast. But that's an option that people are looking to on a seasonal, as a bit of a seasonal solution. So lots of creativity, but also I think we need some assistance as well, not having that one entity that could tackle staff housing.
Yeah. Is that an option in Port Hardy, Elizabeth? Is there an option for an employer to, buy someplace for their employees to live?
There have been some businesses up on the North Island who have done that, purchasing houses that could accommodate their staff. So that's an option. So is living in some of the campgrounds and RV sites. I think it would be good if because there are people that are not necessarily choosing to live this way, but they're forced to live this way. If there was some kind of tenant right for people who are living in those places, because there currently isn't. Like if you're renting a home, it's a little bit different because you are under the Landlord Tenant Act. So I think it would be really helpful to advocate for that too.
A lot of businesses have survived through this entire thing because of various types of support from government, but not all have made it. Elizabeth, has there been business failure through the pandemic in Port Hardy?
Surprisingly, no. There's been a couple of places that have closed. I don't know if it's specific to the pandemic. Certainly it's been a struggle, but we've had businesses open. So we've had new members. We lost some old members, but we've had new members join and new businesses open. And one of the things we noticed too is that some people, they're coming back home. They might have been somewhere on the Lower Mainland and realized that the nature of their work meant they don't have to live there. So they came back, and we're having services and talent in town that we didn't have 2 years ago, it's on the plus side for sure. And, especially if they're able to purchase a home or, have family or something here. So, for example, there's a coffee company that moved in here, and a media company, a videographer who wasn't here before. So, for a small town, these types of resources and talent are absolutely valued up here.
Yeah. What about Tofino, Jen? Has there been a change there? Have businesses decided to just shut down or they couldn't make it through?
Well, I would say that in the first few months of the pandemic, we did see about 3 businesses close, which in a small town is a lot, but 2 of them, I think, were in a bit of a precarious position already, and it wasn't necessarily pandemic related. Some landlords weren't being very accommodating before the rent program came in as well, so that might have played into it. But I would echo what Elizabeth has said too, that we've seen a few businesses open during this time period, which must have been a very stressful and tough way to start your new business. But a few of them are really flourishing, and it's been great to see. So overall, I'd say we're up, although initially we did lose a couple.
Yeah. Something else that's always in the conversation now, and it's impacting the cost of living, is the supply chain, the way we get goods and things brought to us here on Vancouver Island. Of course, the big storm in November interrupted that with the damage to the Malahat and the Coquihalla and all the other things that happened. Jen, in Tofino, you've always had that issue of people having to bring goods across the island. You've had that construction going on for a few years at Kennedy Lake. That's kind of disrupted things a little bit. But how solid and strong is the supply chain for you right now, and how much of a factor is that in your members' businesses?
Well, like you mentioned, that project has been ongoing actually since 2018. It was meant to be done in 2020, but hopefully we will see the end of it this year. The Kennedy Hill upgrade project. So that for a long time, up until around March, I believe, there was a 5-hour daytime closure associated with that project. So needless to say, goods have been moving much more quickly and easily since that closure. That particular midday closure is now done with. And they do still have some overnight closures, but goods are flowing. And we were trying to keep in touch with all the various transport companies throughout and liaising with the Ministry of Transportation as well. And they were like, initially, we didn't get much from them, but towards the end of the project, they've been super accommodating with the different businesses and their needs. So they've shifted their closure times and project times as much as they can to accommodate the business community, because, like you said, we're so reliant on that everything coming to us. I would say it is still a challenge to get things out here in a timely way, especially. They might come, but it will take a long time and be quite expensive. So, I mean, that's always been an issue, but I feel like it's more so with the current supply chain issues.
Yeah. What about Port Hardy at the terminus of that beautiful long drive, Elizabeth? How's the supply chain right now, and what's it impacting?
I think at the moment, just from speaking to all of our members to find out the things that were really causing them challenges, supply chain came up a couple of times. It's not huge for all of our businesses. It's not where the majority of our businesses were focusing, where their challenges lie. But certainly, it's a long way to come because we're very top of the island. But we do have, a highway that goes from bottom to top. We don't have the road being ripped up and 5-hour delays. That would just drive me crazy. So I think it's pretty much normal up here, because it's always a bit of a challenge anyway, because it's coming from so far, getting up here. I mean, during COVID, of course, there were things that you couldn't find in the store, but I don't think that had much to do with our supply chain. I think there was just shortages everywhere, and yeah.
Over shopping by people too probably was a factor.
A little bit of I was going to say that was, yeah.
Yeah. So when we talk about the supply chain, the interruptions that were caused by the big storm in November, that is climate change. Even those who were deniers are starting to understand it. I want to talk about that next. We're talking on Chamber Chats today with life on the North Island and the west coast of Vancouver Island, and how things have progressed through the pandemic. I'm doing that with my colleagues Elizabeth Aman-Hume, who is the Executive Director of the Port Hardy Chamber of Commerce, and Jen Dart is the Executive Director of the Tofino-Long Beach Chamber of Commerce. So Elizabeth, climate change, it's kind of a game changer for everybody. It's something that people are taking a look at in the core existence of their business. What do you hear from your members about adaptation around climate change?
I think we're all becoming more keenly aware of being green, because that's kind of where it all starts, and being more cognizant of our environment and the world we're living in. And I think when you look at some of the big storms and things that have happened, that is becoming more and more top of people's minds. And businesses up here have been responding, but by making sure that they work in as green a space as possible in terms of, paper straws or things like that, recyclable goods, using obviously reusable shopping bags and things like that. So I think I would say we're pretty much on par with the rest of the island in terms of what we're doing in our own small way. I think we feel it more keenly because we are definitely in a beautiful place, and we feel like we owe it proper stewardship.
Yeah, when you get to both of your communities, you're a little more closely affiliated with fishing, logging, and mining and things like that than the rest of the island is. So in that sense, the green conversation is a bit different, but Jen, Tofino's always been a pretty green thinking kind of place, hasn't it?
Yeah, and you see that reflected, much like Elizabeth was saying, at the individual business level. The municipality here has banned single-use plastic, so that includes cutlery, so none of the restaurants use. They're all using environmentally friendly takeout containers. So that's been amazing to see our local businesses jump on some of the initiatives that the local Surfrider Pacific Rim group has and nonprofit has spearheaded. We also have a carbon neutral company in Tofino using carbon offsets. So there are, like, at that individual business level, I think there's lots of action happening. I mean, it's sort of at that higher level that we need to see a bit more, because obviously we're tourism communities, we're challenged by the fact that people have to travel here. So it's quite a dilemma when you start to think about air travel and all that kind of thing. But I feel like individual businesses are doing great things and doing as much as they can personally do. And definitely it's been top of mind a lot more recently.
Yeah, for sure. Just about out of time. So really quickly, Elizabeth, when we come and visit you in Port Hardy, what are we going to do when we get there?
Well, I have to say that we are sort of recognizing the evolution away from whales, bears, and salmon. And what we really want people to do when they come here is have an authentic experience. So as such, we focus on micro experiences. So when you come here, Bruce, you can explore tidal pools. You can listen to the wind blow through the treetops of old growth forests. You can get to know the locals, which is great. Or you can just enjoy time alone on a vast beach. There's just so many authentic experiences to be enjoyed up here. And we do have whale watching tours and kayaking and all those things too.
Yeah, it is very genuine there, that's for sure. And Jen, I think we're all familiar with what usually happens in Tofino, so you're kind of getting back to all that stuff now, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, the park is fully open again, pretty much. Obviously, the beaches have stayed open, but in Tofino, we're the surf capital of Canada, so that's something a lot of people come here for, as well as those marine excursions to places like Mayor's Island. And yeah, culinary tourism too is huge for Tofino, and our retail sector has really been killing it lately. So we're really lucky. There's lots to do here for all range of tastes.
Both places are worth the trip. As I said earlier, I think most of us have been to Tofino at some point, but not everybody has been to Port Hardy. I have. I suggest the trip. I recommend you go when you get a chance. And the businesses there are strong and on track because of the hard work of my colleagues Jen Dart and Elizabeth Aman-Hume, both with the Chambers of Commerce in Tofino and in Port Hardy as well. Thank you both for all you do. Thanks for your time today.
Thanks so much, Bruce.
Thank you for having us. This has been fun.
Yeah, it really is fun, isn't it? We do it every week. So we'll see you next time around for another Chamber Chat.